Hello everyone, myself Tanisha Tomar BA Honours Political Science. I am going to explain a book of John Locke, Two Treatises of Government, in which I explain 6 chapters, chapters 7 to 12. Chapter number 7 of Political or Civil Society, chapter number 8 of the Beginning of Political Societies, chapter number 9 of the Ends of Political Society and Government, chapter number 10 of the Forms of a Commonwealth, chapter number 11 of the extent of the legislative power, chapter number 12 the legislative, executive and the federative power of the Commonwealth. Now further move chapter number 7 of Political or Civil Society, in which Locke says Locke's argument that humankind is a natural inclination for society is again rooted in the Sir Robert Hooke publication 1854, The Laws of Polity, in which Hooker argues that very same thing. The key to each of the individual societies outline, that is, each require consent. Here, conjugal society arise from a consent, which again implies freely given consent. Again, men do not have dominion over women according to Locke. He instances when a husband and wife may disagree concerning child rearing, the decision usually defaults to the husband. But Locke is quick to point out that women still possess a natural and innate right to freedom and equality that cannot be infringed on by another, including one's own husband, as he has no more natural power and freedom than his wife. Locke poses to argue that paternal power is not a political power every chance he gets, which underscores the importance of his primary argument that absolute monarchies which invoke paternal power are an illegitimate form of government. This is also highlights another of Locke's primary argument, which is that power over another is always limited unless that power is taken during a state of war, as anyone who consents to enter a state of war forfeits their right to life and reason. This again points to Locke belief that absolute monarchies are an illegitimate form of government and the power they claim to invoke is insufficient for the extent to which they use it. Locke later repeats the idea of commonwealth as umpires for the common good, which suggests the commonwealth is responsible for making sure the people are taken care of in the best way possible. Thus, they are umpires for deciding when their government in England, the king has acted against the common good, which implied within a state of monarchy. Now further move from the chapter 7 of the beginning of political societies, in which Locke said Locke's idea of consent again applies to his argument against absolute monarchies. Subjects do not consent to the rule of the absolute monarchy, that power is exerted on them against their will if a subject did not willingly consent to unite with such a society. It cannot be considered civil society and the subject cannot be accepted to obey. Here Locke references Thomas Hobbes by direct mentioning Hobbes' book. Hobbes' famous book is Leviathan, which is published in 1951. In this, a work of political theory that argues the power of absolute monarchy and the divine right of king. Hobbes' book is long, over 600 pages. Compare book to Locke's much shorter book at just over 100, and Locke suggests Leviathan could have been shorter if Hobbes would have just accepted that absolute monarchy cannot stand because they did not involve consent, contract, or consider the majority. There obviously are no surviving records from the very first civil society, but since civil societies exist, Locke points out that such societies had to start sometime. Civil society clearly began with the consent of the people. That is known as a social contract between the state and the people. An agreement to live together under the common rule for the common welfare or common good. Just Geo Divino is Latin. Geo Divino is Latin word which is derived from which is means by divine law, in which Locke argues that even biblical people did not believe their king was ordered by God, divine right. Saul was Israel's first king. Israel's first king was the Saul, and he was appointed by God. However, king after Saul were and appointed by people, which means the people freely picked their king and imbued him willingly with the power to rule. Locke is quick to point out that one can still be free under a monarchy as long as that monarchy is not absolute. After all, Locke does support King William, who he claimed ruled by the consent of the people. मतलब he needs a state and people's consent agreement. This again underscores Locke's argument of contract and the fact that everyone is born free outside power or force. Rousseau's famous quote is, "Everyone is born free but everywhere in chains." Also, Locke's argument on this quote, "Everyone is free from any outside power or force." In order to be part an absolute monarchy, a child would have to consent to join after the age of reason, and even they have can never give away the right to rule over their life. We further move chapter number 9. Chapter number 9 of the ends of political society and government, in which Locke said, while Locke does not exactly agree with Hobbes' definition of the state of nature, as Hobbes has said that human nature is nasty, brutish, solidarity, poor, self-interest, Locke does not purely against it or purely favor it, but Locke does consent that nature can be an excessively dangerous place in which one often forced into a state of war, the desire for the protection of society. Law in absolute monarchies are arbitrary and executed on a whim. In absolute monarchies, the king is the supreme power. There is a one-man show. In absolute monarchy, only king is supreme power and make and execute law. Only king will make laws and implement it. Words are frequently italicized in the second treaty, which seems to imply their importance. Here Locke drives home the fundamental importance of peace, safety, and the public good in society. The very thing that an absolute monarchy traditionally ignores. We further move to the chapter 10, names of the forms of a commonwealth. In this chapter, Locke lists possible forms of commonwealth, and even though he offers several types of monarchies, he does not specifically mention absolute monarchy. He talks about different types of monarchies, not only absolute monarchy. Locke neglect to mention absolute monarchy implies such monarchies are not commonwealth. In every other example, the people of a commonwealth freely consent to join said society. However, in absolute monarchy, there is no consent, as a king rule is considered automatic. Locke does not maintain that power and freedom are equal within a commonwealth. Above, he even mentions oligarchies, which are notoriously oppressive, but he doesn't insist that subjects of a commonwealth of any kind consent freely to whatever established power relationship that community adopts, provided power does not extend beyond the power humans have in a state of nature. He said that no excessive use of power. Humans only live in the state of nature. We further move chapter 11, which is of the extent of the legislative power. In this chapter, Locke said, Locke especially outlines the limitation of the power of government over the people. Just because power is husband by the people and power is handed by the people to the legislative does not given the body of power free resign as in absolute monarchy. The fact that is no one can exempt from the law of commonwealth again excludes over monarchy absolute monarchy from civil society, and absolute monarchy is not subject to any law or regulation, and they are the supreme power and the executor of the law. This again speak to the illegitimacy of absolute monarchy, which is one of the Locke's chief argument. Locke's main primary argument was the absolute monarchy. Then he speaks about again and again. In absolute monarchy, the king is the legislative power, only the supreme power, and he is not limited in his power. Locke said that in absolute monarchies, king is a supreme power, one man show, and he does not limit it in his power. He want to do anything. Locke says much power over another is not free to have under any circumstances, save for a state of war, unless a king subject consent to the enter into a state of war with the king. He has no claim to rule over their lives. Locke implies here that an absolute monarchy is worse than a state of nature. Locke said that absolute monarchy is very, very worse than a state of nature, as subject of an absolute monarchy are not permitted to resist in any way. In that vein, when someone's property is unjustly seized by the king to add money to the king's coffer, is no impartial judge to which the subject can appeal, and they have no right to resist or protect their own property, which effectively makes an absolute monarchy even worse than nature. Subjects of absolute monarchies are often stripped of land. Thus, Locke's remark about one's right to land in the first place. Locke seems to imply here that absolute power is at time necessary in cases where martial law, military law, must be enacted to ensure the prevention of commonwealth against some force would be example for Locke's argument. Again, the US United Nation government greatly draws from Locke's theories. In the United States, the Constitution demands that Congress meet at least once a year and representatives are elected for 2-year terms. Locke again argues that even the supreme power of the legislative is limited. Locke is not against paying one's fair share of taxes. He sees this is an obligation to the commonwealth, but one still must consider such tax. All of Locke's theories boil down to consent and the fact that no one can consent to give away more power than they have. Now we next last one chapter is the 12th chapter, the legislative, executive, and the federative powers of the Commonwealth. Further move. In this chapter, Locke said again, this points to absolute monarchies in which the king is both the legislative power and the executive power. Same here, I told earlier, in absolute monarchies, the king is the supreme power, legislative power, and the executive power. So there is a one-man show. Not only can the king pick and choose which laws can the to enact based on his desires, king choose only those laws which is according to his desires. He can also pick and choose which law he follows or enforces. Only choose that laws which are helpful her, and since he is charge of punishment and they give punishment to their people, there is a absolutely no oversight in such a monarchy, which is automatically created when the power to make and enforce laws is placed in two separate bodies of power. Even though Locke's book is work of political theory, he still infuses it with irony and sarcasm, as he does here in claiming he does not care what the reader calls the federative power. This also implies that he does care what people call the legislative and executive power, which implies issues uh, intrinsic, internal to the Commonwealth take priority over foreign issue outside the Commonwealth. Now, thank you. This is my explanation 7 to 12 chapters, part 2 by Tanisha Tomar. Thank you.